Don't sign that. Read page 14. Evelyn whispered her hand, slamming onto the mahogany table with such force that a crystal glass shattered into 1,000 jagged diamonds. Julian Thorne froze his $50,000 pen, hovering millimeters away from a contract that would bury his wife's legacy forever. Beside him, his lawyer Caleb smirked, unaware the invisible waitress in the starched apron had already unspooled his $20 million betrayal. Evelyn didn't flinch as security lunged. She was no longer a server polishing silver, but a NYU forensic accountant, about to ignite a fire that not even a billionaire's wealth could extinguish. Here is the true story of the night. Evelyn Hope, Clear's throat, risked her life for a stranger. Evelyn Hope adjusted the collar of her starch-stiff uniform, flinching slightly as the rough fabric grazed the bruise on her collarbone, a parting gift from a landlord who didn't believe in grace periods. She stared at herself in the tarnished mirror of the locker room. Her eyes, usually a sharp, intelligent hazel, looked tired. She was 26, holding a master's degree in forensic accounting from NYU. Yet here she was, polishing silverware in the basement of Lobsidian Manhattan's most exclusive members-only dining club. Life had a funny way of humbling you. After her father's sudden illness wiped out her savings, and the subsequent gap in her resume made her unhireable to the big firms, Evelyn had taken the only job that paid cash instantly. Hope. Stop admiring yourself and get to the floor. VIPs inbound. The floor manager Alistair barked from the doorway. Alistair was a man who sweated anxiety and cologne in equal measure. Table 9 is reserved. Julian Thorne. Evelyn felt a jolt. Julian Thorne, the CEO of Etherloop, the company that had revolutionized renewable energy batteries. He was a visionary, a man on the cover of Forbes and Time. Clear's throat. But the tabloids recently painted a different picture. A recluse grieving the sudden death of his wife, barely holding his empire together. I'm on it, Alistair, Evelyn said, smoothing her apron. And Hope? Alistair grabbed her arm, his grip tight. Be invisible. Mr. Thorne is meeting with Caleb Anthony, Clear's throat tonight to close the merger of the century. If you drop so much as a spoon, you won't just be fired, you'll be blacklisted from every restaurant in the tri-state area. Do you understand crystal clear? Evelyn walked out onto the floor of an obsidian. The restaurant was a cavern of shadows and gold leaf smelling of truffle oil and old money. Table 9 was tucked away in a private alcove draped in heavy burgundy curtains to ensure absolute privacy. As she approached the station, the guests arrived. Julian Thorne looked nothing like his magazine covers. He was gaunt, his tuxedo hanging loosely on his frame. His eyes were bloodshot, darting around the room with a paranoia that made Evelyn's stomach turn. He looked like a man walking to the gallows. Beside him strutted Caleb Anthony. Clear's throat. If Julian was the crumbling king, Caleb was the usurper in waiting. Anthony was Thorne's personal attorney and acting COO. He was handsome in a slick, artificial way, with teeth that were too white and a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. Evelyn stood in the shadows, waiting for the signal to approach. Julian, honestly, Caleb said, his voice smooth as oil. He pulled out a chair for the billionaire. You're overthinking it. The board is eating you alive. This merger with OmniP saves Etherloop. It saves your legacy. It saves Lisa's memory. At the mention of his late wife, Julian flinched. He slumped into the chair. I know, Caleb. It feels rushed. Why do we have to sign tonight? Why here? Why not at the offices with the full legal team? Because the SEC is breathing down our necks and the market opens in 6 hours. Caleb replied, snapping his fingers for a server without looking up. We need this done before the morning bell. I've had the legal team vet this 3 times. I'm your best friend, Julian. Would I let you jump off a cliff? Evelyn stepped forward, her heart hammering against her ribs. She had an instinct about people, a skill honed by years of analyzing fraud cases in grad school. And her instinct was screaming that Caleb Anthony was a shark, sensing blood in the water. Good evening, gentlemen. Evelyn said, her voice steady. My name is Evelyn. I'll be taking care of you tonight. Would you like to start with the wine list?" Caleb waved a hand dismissively. "No list. Bring us the 82 Chateau Margaux and keep it coming. My friend here needs to relax." Julian looked up at Evelyn. For a second, their eyes locked. He looked lost. "Just water for me, please." "Nonsense." Caleb boomed, slapping Julian on the back. "We are celebrating the deal of a lifetime. Bring the bottle and 2 glasses." He turned his cold gaze to Evelyn, "And then leave us alone until I call for you. We have business to discuss." "Of course, sir." As Evelyn retreated to the wine cellar, her mind raced. She knew Etherloop's financials. She followed the market. The company was struggling, yes, but a merger with Omniorp. Omniorp was known for stripping companies for parts and liquidating the assets. It made no sense for a man like Julian Thorne, who was obsessed with green energy, to sell to a company known for oil drilling. Something was wrong. She retrieved the $4,000 bottle of wine. As she polished the glasses, she watched them from across the room. Caleb was leaning in close speaking, rapidly tapping a thick stack of documents sitting on the table. Julian was rubbing his temples, looking like he wanted to disappear. Evelyn knew she should just do her job. She needed the rent money. She needed to survive. But as she walked back toward table 9, she didn't know that she was walking straight into a crime scene. The dinner service dragged on for 2 hours. The atmosphere at table 9 grew heavier with every course. Caleb Anthony was eating a rare steak with gusto, while Julian pushed a salad around his plate, barely taking a bite. However, Julian was drinking. Under Caleb's constant pressure. One more toast to the future. Julian the billionaire had finished 3 glasses of the heavy red wine. Evelyn moved like a ghost refilling water clearing crumbs, always keeping her head down, but her ears were wide open. The structure of the deal. Caleb was saying, his voice low. Keeps you on as chairman emeritus. You keep your salary. You keep the house in the Hamptons. And most importantly, you keep the patents for the clean water project. That was Lisa's dream, right? The patents are safe. Julian slurred slightly. That's the most important thing. If Omniorp gets the patents, they'll bury the technology. Ironclad. Julian. Clause 4, Section B. It's all there. Evelyn was clearing the bread plates when she saw the stack of papers. It was a massive document, easily 200 pages, bound with a heavy clip. I need to use the restroom, Caleb announced, suddenly standing up and buttoning his jacket. When I get back, we sign, clears throat, then we celebrate properly. He strode past Evelyn, not even acknowledging her presence. Julian sat alone, staring into his wineglass. So Evelyn asked softly, "Would you like some coffee?" Julian looked up, startled. No, thank you. Actually, wait." He looked at the papers. "I should read this again." "My eyes are blurring." "Lighting is dim in here, Sir," Evelyn said. She hesitated. She was crossing a line, but she couldn't help it. "If you'd like, I can bring a reading light." "No time," Julian muttered. "Caleb says, we have to sign." Clears throat. Evelyn backed away, intending to go to the kitchen. But as she passed the corridor leading to the restrooms and the wine cellar, she heard a voice. It was hushed, urgent, and angry. It was Caleb. He wasn't in the restroom. He was standing in the dark alcove near the emergency exit, his phone pressed to his ear. Evelyn stopped. She pretended to be adjusting a tray on a service stand just around the corner. "He's almost ready," Caleb whispered, his voice lacking the smooth charm he used at the table now. He sounded cruel. "Yes, I've been pouring the Margaux down his throat for 2 hours. He's pliable." Evelyn held her breath. "No, you idiot." Caleb snapped into the phone. "He thinks he's keeping the patents. He hasn't read the rider. I swapped the pages in the car. Page 14 triggers a total asset liquidation upon signature. Omniorp gets everything. The patents, the real estate, the trust fund. Thorne walks away with debt and a title that means nothing." Clears throat. Evelyn's blood ran cold. He swapped the pages. This wasn't a bad business deal. It was fraud. Grand larceny on a $1 billion scale, I know. Caleb laughed softly. By tomorrow morning, Julian Thorne will be destitute and I'll be sitting on a $20 million commission. Just have the car ready. We sign in 10 minutes. Caleb hung up. Evelyn's heart was pounding so hard she thought it would crack a rib. She had to move. If Caleb caught her eavesdropping, she was dead. Maybe literally. These were powerful men. Clear's throat. She skewed back to the kitchen just seconds before Caleb walked back into the dining room. Inside the kitchen, the noise was deafening. Chefs shouting, pans clanging. Evelyn leaned against the stainless steel counter, her hands, Clear's throat, shaking. What do I do? If she said nothing, Julian Thorne, a man who was grieving vulnerable and seemingly kind, would lose everything. His life's work, his wife's legacy stolen by the man he trusted most. If she spoke up, she would be fired no worse. Caleb Anthony was a high-powered attorney. He would destroy her. He would ensure she never worked in this city again. She had rent due in 2 days. She had no safety net. Hope dessert for table 9 now. Alistair screamed, shoving a tray with a chocolate soul into her hands. Anthony asked for the check, and the notary is waiting in the lobby. Move the notary. It was happening now. Evelyn looked at the tray. Then she looked at the door leading to the dining room. She remembered the look in Julian's eyes, the sadness, the trust he placed in Caleb. She remembered her father broken by a system that didn't care about the little guy. She remembered promising herself that she would never let injustice slide if she could stop it. She took a deep breath. She grabbed the tray. She walked back out onto the floor. Caleb was back at the table. He had opened the document to the signature page. He had placed a gold pen in Julian's hand. "Here we go, brother," Caleb said, grinning. "Sign on the line and your worries are over." Julian's hand was shaking. The tip of the pen hovered over the paper. Evelyn approached the table. She wasn't just a waitress anymore. In her mind, she was back in the forensic accounting lab, spotting the discrepancy that unraveled the lie. She set the stool down. Her hand didn't shake. "Sir," Evelyn said. Caleb snapped his head up. "We didn't ask for you." "Leave." Sir, Evelyn said again, looking directly at Julian, ignoring the daggers Caleb was staring into her. "Before you sign, you dropped your napkin." Julian looked confused. What Evelyn reached across the table, ostensibly to adjust a fork, but she deliberately knocked the heavy crystal water glass over. Ideally, it would have just spilled water, but her aim was true. The glass shattered against the edge of the table, sending shards flying and ice water soaking into the tablecloth and splashing onto the bottom edge of the contract. "You clumsy idiot," Caleb roared, jumping up. "Look what you've done." The dining room went silent. All eyes turned to table 9. Alistair, the manager, was sprinting across the room, his face purple with rage. "I am so sorry," Evelyn said, grabbing a napkin and dabbing at the table. But she didn't dab the water. She used the chaos to grab the thick document. "Give me that." Caleb lunged for her. Evelyn sidestepped him. She flipped the wet document open. She knew exactly what she was looking for. She had heard him say it. Page 14. She ripped the document open to page 14. It was dense legalese, single-spaced tiny font, but her eyes scanned it with practiced speed. There it was. Subsection 4 to C. Asset transfer and liquidation. Security. Caleb screamed. "Get this crazy woman out of here." 2 large bouncers were rushing toward the table. Alistair was reaching for her arm. Julian sat frozen water dripping from his lap, looking completely bewildered. Evelyn locked eyes with the billionaire. She held the paper up her finger, pressing against the paragraph. "Don't sign that," she said, her voice clear and cutting through the noise of the restaurant. "Caleb isn't saving your company. Read page 14. He's liquidating your wife's patents." Caleb's face went from angry to pale white in a split second. He lunged at her, grabbing her wrist violently. "Shut your mouth, you lying. Let her go," a voice said. It wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a thunderclap. Julian Thorne stood up. He wasn't slumping anymore. The fog of the alcohol seemed to evaporate in the face of adrenaline. He looked at Caleb, then at Evelyn, and finally at the document in her hand. "Julian, she's crazy. She's just trying to get a payout." Caleb stammered, his sweat now visible. I said. Julian growled, his eyes darkening. "Let her go and give me the paper." The silence in Sidian was no longer just quiet. It was a physical weight pressing down on the chest of every patron in the room. The clinking of silverware had ceased. The soft hum of jazz seemed to have evaporated. 50 pairs of eyes were fixed on the corner alcove, where a billionaire, a lawyer, and a waitress stood in a tableau of shattered glass and ruined intentions. Caleb Anthony released Evelyn's wrist. He did so not out of obedience, but out of shock. His hand fell to his side, twitching slightly, a nervous tick that betrayed the polished veneer of the high-powered attorney. Julian Thorne did not look at Evelyn. He did not look at Caleb. His entire world had narrowed down to the piece of paper trembling in his hand. The paper was wet. The edge stained pink from the wine that had splashed during the chaos, but the black ink was stark and legible. Page 14. Julian whispered, his voice dry, sounding like dead leaves scraping across pavement. He lifted the document closer to his eyes, squinting through the dim amber lighting of the restaurant. He wasn't skimming. He was reading every syllable, his lips moving silently as he passed the legal syntax. Evelyn stood frozen, her chest heaving. The adrenaline that had propelled her to smash the glass was beginning to curdle into cold fear. She realized suddenly how small she was. She was a waitress in a room full of titans. If she was wrong, if she had misheard the phone call, or if she had misinterpreted the legal jargon in the heat of the moment, her life was over. "Alice Dister," the manager was standing 3 feet away, his face a mask of horrified fury, waiting for the signal to drag her out by her hair. But Julian kept reading. Subsection 4C. Julian read aloud, his voice gaining a terrifying steadiness. Upon execution of this agreement, all intellectual property, inclusive of Class A patents, filed under the Clean Water Initiative. Previously, the Lisa Thorne Trust shall be transferred to the holding entity for immediate asset valuation and subsequent liquidation to offset acquired debt. Julian stopped. He lowered the paper. The air in the alcove dropped 10 degrees. He turned to Caleb. The look on Julian's face wasn't anger. It was something far worse. It was the hollow, devastating realization of a man who discovers that the flaw he has been standing on for 20 years never existed. "Liquidation," Julian said. The word hung in the air. "Caleb, you told me you swore on your mother's life that Lisa's patents were protected. You said they were firewalled." Caleb Anthony let out a short, breathless laugh. It was the sound of a man trying to restart a stalled engine. He adjusted his silk tie, his eyes darting to the curious onlookers before settling back on Julian with a practiced, condescending smile. "Julian, please," Caleb said, his voice dropping to a smooth, reasonable purr. "You're hysterical. You've had too much wine and this servant has worked you up. That clause is standard boilerplate. It's just legal protection. It doesn't mean we will liquidate the patents. It just gives the parent company the option in the event of total bankruptcy, which won't happen. I'm protecting you." He took a step toward Julian, reaching out a hand to take the paper back. "Give me the document, Julian. Let's get you some fresh water. We can sign the clean copy in the car. Standard boilerplate." The voice didn't belong to Julian. It was Evelyn. She hadn't stepped back. She hadn't run away. She was standing her ground, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. Her forensic training, buried under 3 years of serving pasta and pouring wine, was clawing its way to the surface. She saw the lie, and she couldn't let it stand. "I'm sorry, sir," Evelyn said, her voice shaking but clear. "But that is not boilerplate. I hold a master's in forensic accounting from NYU. I spent 2 years analyzing corporate fraud for the district attorney's internship program before my father got sick." Caleb whipped around to face her, his eyes bulging. "You shut your mouth, you little standard liquidation clauses." Evelyn continued, speaking faster now. The facts tumbling out of her like armor are usually found in Section 9 regarding default scenarios. by placing it in Section 4 under Asset Transfer and specifically naming the Lisa Thorne Trust. This isn't a safety net, it's a sale. It's an active instruction to sell the patents the moment the ink is dry. She looked at Julian. "Sir, if you sign that, Omnicorp will sell your wife's technology to the highest bidder by noon tomorrow. It's not a possibility. It's the primary objective of this contract." Julian looked from Evelyn to Caleb. He saw the panic in Caleb's eyes. He saw the sweat beading on his friend's upper lip. He saw the way Caleb's hand was inching toward the inside pocket of his jacket. "Is she telling the truth?" Julian asked. The question was barely a whisper, but it carried the force of a judgment. Caleb's mask cracked. "She's a waitress, Julian." Caleb hissed, his voice rising, cracking with desperation. "She's a nobody. Look at her. She's probably high. Or maybe she's a corporate spy planted here by Techstrat to sabotage the deal. Are you going to trust a girl who scrubs dishes over me? Over me? I was the best man at your wedding, Julian. I held your hand at the funeral." That was the wrong thing to say. At the mention of the funeral, Julian's face went rigid. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. He remembered the funeral. He remembered Caleb handling the arrangements. He remembered Caleb keeping the press away, and he remembered Caleb telling him day after day that the only way to honor Lisa was to merge the company. Julian looked down at the contract in his hand. He gripped it tight, crumpling the pages. "You swapped the pages," Julian said. "In the car. You told me to read the draft at the office, but you swapped the writer in the car. I did no such thing." Caleb spat his face, flushing red. "This is insanity. I am leaving, and I am taking this deal with me. If you don't sign tonight, Julian, the stock crashes tomorrow. You lose everything. Do you hear me? Everything." Julian stared at him. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then slowly, deliberately, Julian Thorne tore the contract in half. The sound of the thick paper ripping was like a gunshot in the quiet room. He put the halves together and tore them again, and again, until the multi-million-dollar merger and the death warrant for his wife's legacy was nothing but confetti raining down onto the wet tablecloth. "I'd rather lose every dollar," Julian said, his voice low and dangerous, "than let you sell her memory for a commission." He turned to Evelyn. His eyes, previously bloodshot and weary, were now piercingly intense. He looked at her name tag. "Evelyn," he said. "Thank you." Caleb let out a primal growl of frustration. "You idiot. You weak, pathetic fool. You've just thrown away $6 billion. Caleb grabbed his phone and began typing furiously. "You think this is over? You think you can just tear it up? The board is waiting. The investors are waiting. I have the power of attorney, Julian. I can authorize the intent to sign." "Not if I fire you," Julian said. "You can't fire me." Caleb laughed. A manic, high-pitched sound. "I'm the acting COO. You need a board vote to remove me? And the board is in my pocket. You're done, Thorne. I'm going to bury you." Caleb turned to the manager, Alastair, who was trembling by the service station. "Call the police," Caleb commanded, pointing a shaking finger at Evelyn. "This woman assaulted me. She destroyed private property. I want her arrested now." The atmosphere in Lobsidian shifted from shock to chaos. The murmurs of the crowd grew louder. Phones were out recording the meltdown of one of New York's most prominent figures. Alastair, the manager, was caught in the crossfire. He looked at Caleb Anthony, a man who spent $50,000 a year at this restaurant, and then at Evelyn, his employee. The choice to a man like Alastair was obvious. Money talks, security. Alastair barked, snapping his fingers. "Grab her, hold her for the police." Two large men in black suits, the restaurant's security detail, stepped out from the shadows near the entrance. They moved toward Evelyn with grim purpose. Evelyn backed up, bumping into the service station. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had done the right thing. She knew she had, but the system was closing in on her. The rich and powerful didn't like being exposed, and they always had a backup plan. "Don't touch her," Julian said. He stepped between Evelyn and the security guards. He wasn't a physically imposing man compared to the bouncers, but the aura of authority he projected was absolute. If you lay a hand on her, I will buy this building and evict every single one of you by morning. The security guards hesitated, exchanging uncertain glances. They knew who Julian Thorne was. They knew he could make good on that threat. Caleb, seeing his control slipping, decided to play dirty. He wasn't just a lawyer. He was a fixer. He knew how to manipulate narratives. "He's drunk!" Caleb shouted to the room, gesturing wildly at Julian. "Ladies and gentlemen, look at him. He's intoxicated. He's being manipulated by this woman. She's a con artist. She's been stalking him." Caleb turned his venom toward Evelyn, his eyes narrowing into slits. He took a step closer to her, invading her personal space, ignoring Julian. "Who are you working for?" Caleb hissed his voice low enough that only the three of them could hear. "Who paid you Omnicorp rivals? Or are you just some gold digger trying to play the hero? You have no idea what you've walked into, darling. I will destroy you. I will dig up every unpaid parking ticket, every family secret. I will make sure you rot in a cell." Evelyn looked into Caleb's eyes. They were cold, soulless. But strange enough, his threat didn't make her cower. It made her angry. She thought of the phone call she had overheard, the casual cruelty in his voice when he spoke about liquidating Julian's life. "I'm not working for anyone," Evelyn said, her voice steadying. "I was bringing you wine, and I heard you." Heard what Caleb sneered. "I didn't say anything to you." "Not to me," Evelyn said. She raised her voice slightly, ensuring the nearby tables and the security guards could hear. "I heard you on the phone in the hallway by the emergency exit. You were talking to someone. You said, 'I swapped the pages in the car. Page 14 triggers a total asset liquidation. Thorne walks away with debt.'" She took a breath. "And then you said, 'I'll be sitting on a $20 million commission.'" The number hung in the air. $20 million. Julian turned slowly to look at Caleb. The betrayal was no longer just emotional. It was quantified. 20 million. Julian repeated softly. "That's the kickback fee Omnicorp offers for hostile takeovers. You weren't negotiating a merger, Caleb. You were facilitating a hostile takeover from the inside." Caleb's face drained of color. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. He was a lawyer who lived by the grey areas of the truth, but direct quotes were dangerous, especially when they were accurate. "She's lying," Caleb croaked, but his voice lacked conviction. He looked around the room. The diners weren't looking at him with respect anymore. They were looking at him with disgust. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors at the front of the restaurant burst open. Blue and red lights flashed against the elegant wallpaper. Two uniformed NYPD officers marched in, followed by a man in a plain suit. Caleb let out a sigh of relief. "Finally, officers over here." He waved his arms. "I want this woman arrested for assault and corporate espionage." The officers approached the table. The man in the plain suit stepped forward. He wasn't looking at Evelyn. He was looking at Caleb. "Caleb Anthony?" the detective asked. "Yes, that's me," Caleb said, straightening his tie, regaining his arrogance. "I am Julian Thorne's attorney. This waitress attacked us. I want to press charges immediately." The detective ignored the request. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket. "Mr. Anthony, I'm Detective Miller, Financial Crimes Division. We received a call regarding an ongoing fraud in progress." Caleb froze. "What? Who called you?" "I did." A voice came from the crowd. A young man in a hoodie sitting 3 tables away stood up. He had a laptop open in front of him. He looked like a typical tech kid out of place in the fancy restaurant. Julian blinked. Leo. Julian's 22-year-old head of cybersecurity walked over. He looked nervous, but determined. "I'm sorry, Julian." Leo said, "I've been tracking Caleb's emails for 3 weeks. I knew he was up to something, but I couldn't prove it until tonight. I've been mirroring his phone. I heard the call too." Leo turned to the detective. "I have the audio recording of Mr. Anoni's conversation from 10 minutes ago, and I have the email chains between him and the CFO of Omnicorp discussing the kickback." The room went dead silent again. Caleb Anthony looked like a trapped animal. He looked at the exit, then at the police, then at the shattered glass on the floor. The arrogance finally broke. He wasn't a master manipulator anymore. He was just a thief caught with his hand in the vault. "This is entrapment." Caleb stammered, backing away. "You can't. I have rights. This is inadmissible." "Mr. Anthony," Detective Miller said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. "Please turn around and place your hands behind your back." As the handcuffs clicked onto Caleb's wrists, the restaurant erupted into whispers. The billionaire's best friend led away in chains. Julian watched him go. He didn't say a word. He just watched the man he had trusted with his life being dragged out the door. When the doors swung shut, Julian slowly sank back into his chair. He looked exhausted. He looked broken. He looked up at Evelyn. "You saved me," he said. He sounded surprised, as if he couldn't quite believe it himself. Evelyn felt the adrenaline crash. Her knees went weak. I just did what I had to do. You did a hell of a lot more than that." Leo, the cybersecurity kid, said, grinning at her. "He would have signed it. I was too far away to stop him." Clear's throat. "You were the only one close enough." Julian took a deep breath. He reached for his water glass, realized it was broken, and simply sat back. "Alistair," Julian called out without looking around. The manager, who had been trying to blend into the curtains, skewered forward. "Yes, Mr. Thorne? I, Clear's throat, am so sorry about the disturbance. We had no idea." "Fire her," Julian said. Evelyn's heart stopped. The room spun after everything. After saving his company, he was going to fire her. Alistair looked confused, then relieved. "Yes, of course, Mr. Thorne, immediately. Hope you're done. Get your things." And no, Julian interrupted, his voice sharp. He looked at Alistair with disdain. "I mean, process her termination paperwork from Lobsidian effective immediately." He stood up and turned to Evelyn. A small, genuine smile touched his lips for the first time that night. "Because I'm hiring her," Julian said. "Evelyn, how would you like a job as the head of my internal audit department? I have a feeling I have a lot of mess to clean up, and I need someone who reads the fine print." The week following the incident at Lobsidian was a blur of flashing cameras and legal summons. But for Evelyn Hope, the world had become strangely quiet. She was no longer polishing silverware in a basement. She was standing on the 45th floor of the Etherloop headquarters, looking out over a Manhattan skyline that felt different now that she was looking down on it rather than up from the gutters. The office Julian Thorne had given her was modest but significant. It was situated right next to the executive suite, a physical declaration of trust. Her title was Director of Internal Compliance, but everyone in the building knew what she really was, Julian's bloodhound. However, the victory at the restaurant felt hollow. Evelyn sat at her desk surrounded by boxes of files she had requested from the archives. Julian had given her carte blanche access to the company's history, financial records, and private correspondence. He wanted to know how deep the rot went. He wanted to know if Caleb Anthony acted alone. Clear's throat. It was 11 p.m. on a Tuesday. The office was empty save for the hum of the servers and the cleaning crew on the lower floors. Evelyn rubbed her eyes and picked up a document labeled Project Blue Horizon. It was an innocuous name for a chaotic file. It detailed the supply chain logistics for Etherloop's newest battery prototype. Something was wrong with the numbers. She pulled up the digital ledger on her screen. Caleb Anthony had been authorizing payments to a shell company in the Cayman Islands called Apex Logistics. The payments were categorized as consulting fees. They totaled $12 million over the last 2 years. But when Evelyn cross-referenced Apex Logistics with shipping manifests, she found nothing. No ships, no containers, no consultants, just money leaving the building and disappearing into the dark. "You're still here." Evelyn jumped, spilling coffee on her coaster. She spun around to find Julian Thorne leaning against her doorframe. He looked better than he had at the restaurant. He was shaved, wearing a crisp charcoal suit, and the haunted look in his eyes had been replaced by a grim determination. "Mr. Thorne," Evelyn said, standing up. Yes, I found something." "Call me Julian," he said, walking into the room. He looked at the spread of papers on her desk. And you don't have to work these hours, Evelyn. You're not a waitress anymore. You're salaried. Old habits, she said with a tired smile. And besides, the numbers don't sleep. Julian picked up the file on Apex Logistics. What is this? It's a ghost, Evelyn said, pointing to the screen. Caleb was siphoning money. That's obvious. But look at the dates of the transfers. She tapped the screen. June 12th, August, 4th September, 21st. Julian frowned. Those dates? They correspond with the sabotage incidents. Evelyn nodded. Exactly. Every time a factory line broke down or a prototype failed during testing, Caleb authorized a massive payment to Apex the very next day. He wasn't just stealing Julian. He was paying someone to break your company. Julian sank into the chair opposite her desk. The color drained from his face. Why? Why would he destroy the company he was trying to sell? If the stock price tanked, his commission would be lower. That's what I couldn't figure out, Evelyn said, until I looked deeper into Apex. She pulled up a new window. It was a scanned copy of a heavily redacted incorporation document from the Caymans. She had used a forensic tracer program, something she hadn't touched since grad school, to peel back the digital black ink. The signatory for Apex Logistics isn't Caleb, Evelyn said softly. Julian leaned in. Who is it? Evelyn turned the screen toward him. It's a holding company owned by Vanguard Energy. Julian froze. Vanguard Energy was the biggest oil conglomerate in the world. They were the dinosaurs Etherloop was trying to make extinct. They were the enemy. Caleb wasn't working for Omnicorp. Julian whispered the realization hitting him like a physical blow. Omnicorp was just the storefront. He was working for Vanguard. They didn't want to buy my technology. They wanted to kill it. The room fell silent. This wasn't just fraud anymore. This was industrial warfare. If they own the patents, Julian said, his voice trembling, they can shove them. They can bury the clean water tech in a vault and keep drilling for oil for another 50 years. That's why the liquidation clause was there. Yes, Evelyn said, and Caleb was just the middleman. The real architect is still out there. Suddenly the lights in the office flickered. The computer screens went black. What happened? Evelyn asked, standing up. Power surge, Julian guessed. Then the electronic lock on Evelyn's office door clicked. The red light on the keypad turned solid. Click, click. The door was locked from the outside. That's not a surge, Julian said, his voice dropping. Evelyn's phone buzzed. A text message appeared on the screen. It was from an unknown number. Stop digging or the next accident won't be at a factory. Julian looked at the phone. Then he looked at the glass walls of the office. Beyond them, the hallway was pitch black. We need to leave, Julian said urgently. Now we're locked in, Evelyn said, rushing to the door and pulling the handle. It didn't budge. The building's security system is hardwired. Someone has remote access, Julian said. Call Leo. Evelyn dialed the young cybersecurity chief. It went straight to voicemail. Then a sound came from the ceiling vents, a soft hiss. Evelyn sniffed the air. It smelled sweet like almonds. Gas, she asked, panic rising in her throat. Hylon, Julian corrected, covering his mouth with his sleeve. It's the fire suppression system for the server rooms. It sucks the oxygen out of the air to kill fires. But there's no fire here. They're trying to suffocate us, Evelyn realized. She looked around the room frantically. Desk chair, heavy filing cabinet, and the floor-to-ceiling glass window overlooking the city. The window, Evelyn shouted. We have to break the window. It's reinforced tempered glass. Julian yelled over the hissing noise, which was getting louder. You can't break it with a chair. Evelyn's eyes darted to the corner of the room. There, mounted on the wall in a glass case, was a ceremonial shovel, a gift from the groundbreaking of the first Etherloop factory. It was made of solid titanium. Grab the shovel, Evelyn screamed. Julian didn't hesitate. He grabbed the heavy titanium spade and swung it with all his might against the glass case, shattering it. He pulled the shovel free. The air in the room was already getting thin. Evelyn felt dizzy. Her lungs were burning. Stand back, Julian roared. He swung the shovel like a baseball bat, aiming for the corner of the massive window pane, the weakest point. Crack! A spider web of fractures appeared. Crack! The hiss of the gas was deafening now. Evelyn's vision was blurring. She stumbled, gripping the edge of the desk. "Julian!" she gasped. "One more!" Julian grunted, his face red with exertion. Smash! The window exploded outward. A rush of cold night air blasted into the room, swirling with the shards of glass that rained down 45 stories toward the street. The vacuum effect sucked the halon gas out into the night. Julian dropped the shovel and collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. Evelyn slid down the wall, taking deep, greedy gulps of the oxygen. They sat there for a long minute, the wind howling through the broken window papers, swirling around them like a chaotic snowstorm. Julian crawled over to Evelyn. He grabbed her hand. His grip was iron tight. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice raspy. Evelyn nodded, coughing. "I think so." Who did this?" Julian looked out at the city lights. His face was hard as stone. "Vanguard," he said. "They know we know, and they just tried to kill us." He helped her to her feet. "We can't stay here," Julian said. "They own the security system. They'll send someone to finish the job." "Where do we go?" Evelyn asked. Julian looked at her. "My private hangar. We're going to Washington, D.C. If we're going to fight a war, we need the FBI, and we need to deliver this evidence by hand." The drive to the private airfield was a white-knuckle blur. Julian drove his personal sedan, an electric prototype that moved silently and swiftly through the back streets of Queens. He kept checking the rear-view mirror. Evelyn sat in the passenger seat, clutching the hard drive containing the Apex logistics files to her chest as if it were a bomb. "Leo isn't answering," Evelyn said, trying the cybersecurity chief for the 10th time. Clear's throat. "Do you think they got to him?" "Leo is smart," Julian said, his eyes scanning the dark road. "If he saw the breach, he would have gone dark. He's probably in a bunker somewhere." They arrived at the hangar at 2 a.m. The tarmac was wet with rain. Julian's private jet, a sleek Gulfstream, sat waiting, but there was no pilot. "Where's your crew?" Evelyn asked as they sprinted from the car to the plane. "I didn't call them," Julian said, unlocking the cabin door. "I can't trust anyone on the payroll right now. Vanguard has deep pockets. They could have bought the pilots just like they bought Caleb." Evelyn stopped on the stairs. "So who's flying the plane?" Julian turned back to her, keys in hand. "I am. I got my license before I got my driver's license." They scrambled inside. Julian locked the door and moved into the cockpit. Evelyn strapped herself into the co-pilot seat. She watched as Julian flipped switches with practiced ease, bringing the avionics to life. "Fasten your harness," Julian commanded. "We're leaving without clearance. It's going to be bumpy." The engines winded to life. The jet taxied onto the runway, picking up speed. Just as the wheels were about to lift off, Evelyn saw it. 2 black SUVs smashed through the chain-link fence at the far end of the runway. They were racing toward the plane, headlights blinding. "Julian," Evelyn shouted, pointing. "I see them," Julian said through gritted teeth. He pushed the throttle to the maximum. The SUVs were fast. Men were hanging out of the windows. Evelyn saw the muzzle flashes before she heard the shots. Ping-ping bullets sparked off the fuselage. "Head down," Julian yelled. He pulled back on the yoke. The G-force slammed Evelyn back into her seat. The jet lurched upward, barely clearing the roof of the lead SUV. They climbed steeply into the night sky, leaving the attackers and the lights of New York far below. Once they leveled off at 30,000 feet, the cabin was quiet. Julian engaged the autopilot and slumped back in his seat, wiping sweat from his forehead. That was close. He breathed. Evelyn looked at him. She saw the exhaustion, Clear's throat, but she also saw something else. Life. For the first time since she had met him, Julian Thorne looked fully alive. The corporate zombie was gone. Clear's throat. In his place was a fighter. "You fly pretty well for a billionaire." Evelyn joked weakly, her hand still shaking. Julian chuckled. It was a dry, rusty sound. And you handle gunfights pretty well for an accountant. He turned to look at her. The cockpit lights cast a soft blue glow on their faces. Evelyn, he said seriously, you don't have to do this part. When we land in DC, I can put you in a hotel. I can give you enough money to disappear. This is going to get ugly. Vanguard isn't just a company. It's a superpower. They topple governments. Evelyn looked out the window at the clouds. She thought about her dad. She thought about the countless people who had been cheated by systems designed to crush them. She thought about Caleb Anoni's smug face. I'm not going anywhere, she said. I started this when I broke that glass. I'm finishing it. Julian nodded slowly. Okay, then we do it together. They landed at a small executive airport outside Washington, D.C. at dawn. A black government sedan was waiting for them on the tarmac. Standing next to it was a woman in a trench coat. She looked stern with greying hair pulled back in a tight bun. That's Director Holloway, Julian explained as they taxied in. FBI. She was a friend of my father's. She's the only one in the bureau I trust. They exited the plane. The morning air was crisp and cold. Julian, Director Holloway said, not offering a handshake. You look like hell. Good to see you too, Diane, Julian said. This is Evelyn Hope. She's the one who found the smoking gun. Holloway looked at Evelyn with sharp, assessing eyes. The waitress I read the report on the restaurant incident. You've got guts, kid. I have the files, Evelyn said, holding up the hard drive. Money trails offshore accounts the link to Vanguard. It's all here. If this is real, Holloway said, taking the drive, it's the biggest corporate RICO case in history. But we have a problem. What problem? Julian asked. Caleb Anthony posted bail an hour ago, Holloway said grimly. And he's not in New York. We tracked his GPS. He's here in DC. Evelyn felt a chill. Why is he here? Because he's not running. Julian, clear's throat, realized. He's trying to beat us to the punch. He's going to the Senate. Senator Corcoran. Holloway nodded. The chairman of the Energy Committee. He's in Vanguard's pocket. If Caleb gets to him, they can classify your technology as a national security risk and seize it via eminent domain before we can even file charges. They'll bury the evidence under the Official Secrets Act. He's trying to legally steal the company before we can prove he stole the money. Evelyn said, Exactly, Holloway said. Corcoran is holding a closed-door hearing at 9 a.m. today to discuss energy independence. Caleb is on the guest list. Julian checked his watch. It's 7:30 a.m. We have 90 minutes. To do what Evelyn asked. To crash a Senate hearing, Julian said, buttoning his jacket. He looked at Holloway. Can you get us in? Holloway smiled a thin, dangerous smile. I can get you to the door. Getting through it is up to you. The hearing room in the Russell Senate office building was a fortress of mahogany and silence. Senator Corcoran sat high on the dais, flanked by two other committee members. Below him at the witness table sat Caleb Anthony. He looked calm, composed, and victorious. Mr. Anthony, Senator Corcoran leaning into his microphone. Based on your testimony regarding the instability of Etherloop's leadership and the critical nature of this battery technology, the committee is inclined to agree. We are prepared to invoke the Defense Production Act to place the patents under federal and specifically Vanguard custodianship for national security. Caleb smiled a predator's grin. Thank you, Senator. It is a heavy burden, but necessary to protect American interests. Objection. The heavy double doors at the back of the room swung open with a bang. Julian Thorne strode in disheveled but radiating fury. Beside him walked Evelyn Hope, clutching the hard drive, and Director Holloway, her badge raised high. Mr. Thorne? Senator Corcoran sputtered, his face flushing. This is a closed session. You are trespassing. I'm not trespassing, Senator Julian announced, his voice echoing off the high ceilings. I'm saving you from becoming an accessory to treason. Caleb jumped up, knocking his chair over. Security, remove them. He's mentally unstable. Sit down, Caleb. Holloway barked, her hand resting on her service weapon. The Capitol Police in the room hesitated, looking between the senator and the FBI director. Evelyn stepped forward. She didn't look like a waitress anymore. She looked like the prosecutor she was born to be. She walked straight to the DIs and plugged the hard drive into the presentation console. Senator Evelyn said, her voice steady. The man sitting before you claims Etherloop is unstable, but the instability was manufactured by him. On the giant screens behind the senator, the Apex Logistics file appeared. What is this? Corcoran demanded. Proof, Evelyn said. Caleb Anthony laundered $12 million from Etherloop to sabotage our own factories. But that's not the worst part. She clicked a key. A new spreadsheet appeared. It showed the flow of money out of Apex Logistics. The money didn't stay in the Caymans, Evelyn explained, locking eyes with the senator. It was funneled into a super PAC called Energy for Tomorrow, a PAC that is the primary donor for your re-election campaign, Senator Corcoran. The room went deathly silent. The press gallery, which had been dozing, erupted into a frenzy of camera flashes. Senator Corcoran turned pale. He looked at Caleb with pure hatred. You told me the funds were clean." "They are," Caleb screamed, his composure shattering. "She's faking it. It's a trick. It's forensic accounting." Evelyn countered coldly. "And math doesn't lie." Director Holloway stepped forward. "Caleb Anthony, you are under arrest for corporate espionage, grand larceny, and attempted murder. Senator, we'll be needing your records too." As the handcuffs clicked onto Caleb's wrists for the second and final time, he looked at Julian. "I made you," Caleb spat. "No," Julian replied, putting a hand on Evelyn's shoulder. "You just sold me, and you underestimated the price." 6 months later, Evelyn Hope sat in her corner office at Etherloop. The view of Manhattan was breathtaking. The company stock was at an all-time high after the public revelation of the conspiracy. There was a knock on the door. Julian walked in, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "To the 1-year anniversary," he said, handing her a glass. "Anniversary of what?" Evelyn asked, smiling. "The merger, no," Julian said softly. "The night I ordered water, and you brought me the truth." Evelyn took the glass. She wasn't just the invisible woman anymore. She was the partner who had saved an empire. "Don't sign that," she whispered, clinking her glass against his. "I never will," Julian replied. And that is the incredible true story of how Evelyn Hope, a struggling waitress with a brilliant mind, took down a billion-dollar conspiracy. In the end, Caleb Anthony was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Senator Corcoran resigned in disgrace. As for Evelyn, she didn't just get a job, she got a stake in the company. Today, she is the Chief Financial Officer of Etherloop. And she and Julian Thorne have created a scholarship fund for students who, like her, just need one chance to prove they are more than what their name tag says. It just goes to show you never know who is serving your coffee. They might just save your life. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you saw that contract? Would you have stayed quiet? Or would you have risked it all like Evelyn? Let me know in the comments below, with the phrase, "Don't sign that." Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a story about justice being served. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next